Our nation, our country, our future is built by scientists, by engineers, by innovators, by men and women who see value in learning and in change. The Moses Kotane Institute nurtures future leaders through education in maths and science. Our innovative maths and science program bridges the gap between students and educators, ensuring understanding and efficiency. Become our partner and let's invest in our tomorrow together. The Moses Kotane Institute.
Not sit on your laurels. Some of the companies I know are small companies. It's about re-injecting capital and not buying a BMW too soon, a Ferrari too soon.
Any country would be happy to have these people as entrepreneurs.
The most critical ingredient to achieve that vision is skills.
When you steal public money, my comrade, you are being counter-revolutionary.
Director Patola. Okay, so up next is a woman who knows human resources development very well. She's been running a consultancy for many years now, the Learning for Performance Improvement. And to share her thoughts with us today, please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for Suzanne Hattingh.
You're probably wondering, what on earth is this woman going to talk about training for competence? Surely that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to train for competence. But I'm not really sure that's what we're doing. I think we're training for credits on the NQF. We're not really training for competence, and it's not exactly the same thing. So what I hope to do is to highlight some basic issues, because sometimes I think we've lost the plot in this maze of skills development systems. So I'd like to highlight some basic truths about training for competence. Now, the first truth is that the CETAs didn't invent training. Now, I think some of them think they do. They think they established the system. Training for workforce competence existed long before the CETAs were established, and it will continue long after they have died. We have had, for many of us who've been around for a long time, we've had continuous disruptive changes in the system. We started with 27, then they were 25, 23, 21, and it's actually nice when you put them together because maybe one day we will get to 0. It is an ineffective, complex bureaucratic system that we battle with employers, training providers, learners, everybody battles with it. Now, what is interesting, I went back to the original documentation. You know, the CETAs have been around for 20 years. If any company, if any small business or large business has had a system that has not worked for 20 years, they would scrap it. But we keep trying to fix this damn thing, but we don't really manage that well. So I'm not saying the CETAs must go. I'm not arguing that. I work with some CETAs that are extremely effective. I also, unfortunately, work with some that are totally useless. But all I'm saying is my talk is about let's just think about what we are doing here. And are we doing the right thing always? Recently working with a company, they've been waiting for 3 years for the qualification certificates to come from the CETA. That's totally unacceptable. Okay, the second important point is that the CETA grants and the BEE scorecard, they cannot drive your decisions on training. But unfortunately they do. Because employers implement learnerships, they decide to implement learnerships, you ask them why, they say, because we get CETA grants and we get points on the BEE scorecard. And if a training provider is offering a really valuable training program, they say, but can't you offer this as a learnership? Without really knowing why and what does it actually involve to implement learnerships. I've done a lot of work on learnerships and I find often that the employers don't have the resources or the actual commitment to really implement them properly. So you actually do need that capacity to do that. Any employer, small or large, needs a business-driven, long-term, focused skills planning process. It must be driven by internal needs. It can be influenced by the CETA grants and the BEE, but that shouldn't be the starting point. So I'm not saying BEE is wrong. All I'm saying is you cannot use BEE to determine the kind of training that you're doing in your company. We have to focus training on competency requirements. That's again a very simple, straightforward sentence. And this is normally the process I use when I consult companies. You start with the organization's business strategy. You say, what are the key performance areas to achieve the desired business results? That's quite logical. What are the job categories you need for the KPAs? What functions must be performed? What are the kind of deliverables, the outputs expected? And then you say, well, what are the competencies? And only then can you determine what kind of training or other interventions you need to do to address your skills needs. But you have to go through that logical process. You can't just jump and say, well, the CETA is going to give us this much money if we implement a learnership, therefore let's start with the learnership. And one thing we don't do in South Africa well enough is to analyze the causes of performance gaps, like maybe what is the performance gaps of the CETAs. And you really need to do that in training. But what do we do if somebody's not performing to standards? You send them on training and say, let training fix the problem. They come back, it hasn't addressed the problem. But you have to find out, why are people not performing to standard? Are their outputs and standards not clearly communicated? Do they have the knowledge and skills? Do they have the correct tools? Is the work environment conducive? Is the management actually giving them corrective feedback, etc., etc.? And by the way, a training needs analysis is not a questionnaire that you send out to say, what training do you want to do next year? That's a wish list. That's not a training needs analysis. And the other thing is, we know that training cannot fix performance problems. Now, if you remember nothing else from this, remember the one thing. Training is only effective when a person does not have the skill to perform the job. That's the only time you send somebody on training. But we send everybody on training because we haven't actually done a proper needs analysis, because it takes too much time and it's a lot of bump anyway. Just send these guys. Now, if I was Minister of Higher Education and Training, unfortunately, the President didn't consider me for the post. But what I would say to everybody, employers, universities, everybody, is this year you may only train half the people you trained last year. But this year you damn well have to do it right. Because I believe very strongly we're doing too much training in the country, but we're not doing it properly. That's why we're ending up with, we're spending, I don't even want to calculate the millions we're spending through the CETA system. But we're spending all these millions, but we're not getting it right because we're just doing too much training and we're not focusing it properly. Are we focusing it on clearly identified skills needs? Otherwise, you're wasting your time. Are we actually measuring the value add, the impact on the organization's business? Very few organizations actually do that. We have in South Africa a wonderful system. It's called a target-driven skills development system. Because the minister sets targets, the CETA set targets, then they give grants to employers if they do the training that meets those targets. So it's actually wonderful because at the end of the day, everybody's happy because we've all met the targets. I was asked to assist with there was 1,000 learnership project. They gave each province, said that you must put 1,000 learners on the learnerships. After 2 years, 32 million rand later, not one of those students had a qualification. Part of the problem is I think we do learner selection by taking marbles at the top of the building and throwing them down. And if it hits your head, then you come into the learnership. You know, there's a sort of a logic. We believe in targets in the skills development system, but you know, I often think it's like a heart surgeon. If we had a heart surgeon, we said to the heart surgeon, your target is you have to do 40 heart transplants this year. We don't care if your patients need it. We don't care anything. 40 is your target. Now you're all laughing because we know that is stupidity. But we don't think it's stupidity when we tell each province you have to have 1,000 learners on a learnership. And this is the simple truth. I'm always embarrassed to say that. Training can only contribute towards improved performance if it is focused on accurately identified and clearly described skills gaps and training needs that are derived from the organization's key business objectives. I don't know why that's jumping up and down, because it's such a simple statement that everybody should know. Now we have to ask ourselves whether we're chopping down the right forest. Now I read a wonderful paradigm story, and it could have happened in Mpumalanga where there's, you know, these sappy forests. And they're chopping down the trees and they're having a great time and the machines are going and the lorries are taking the logs away. And one guy climbs up to the top of a hill and he shouts down and he says, "Hey guys, we're chopping down the wrong forest." And they look up and they say, "Just shut up, we're making progress." And my key concern about this is that are we actually developing workplace competence or are we developing competence in unit standards? Because it's not the same thing. And then a statement that many people have heard, I know Vickers has heard me and a lot of people have heard me saying that not all training is NQF-able. And I will keep saying that year after year. I will stand here, I'll be a doddering old lady with a cane, and I will still say that. Because we have created this obsession with credits. So often you hear when somebody says there's a wonderful program, but how many credits am I going to get on the NQF? You might not get any credits, but you might actually learn something in the process. And even the Green Paper says this. They say that much learning is very valuable. It doesn't have to be quality assured. It doesn't have to lead to credits. And it doesn't have to go through this ridiculous quality assurance system that we have developed. And I'm not going to talk about the QCTA qualifications model today. I will spare you my criticism of that today. The next simple truth is that the 1% skill levy is not your training budget. Now, many companies actually spend far more than 1%, but when the government came in with 1%, they said, okay, we spent our 1% levy, so we've done our bit in training. The 1% is mainly intended for formal NQF-aligned programs. So I'm not opposed to those programs. I'm not saying those things are bad, but the 1% is only for that stuff. And companies should be using a lot more money, but for other things. Because if your organization wants to reach competitiveness, if you are really interested in participating in the global economy, etc., NQF-aligned programs is not going to help you. I work a lot with qualifications. I've developed a lot of qualifications. I work with the CETAs. I don't see many if any, of those that are actually going to take you into the knowledge economy, in the global knowledge economy. You have to do other things than CETA-aligned training if you really want to get to that. And your CFO, who's only interested in money, he cannot determine your training priorities. So basically, employers should be spending far more on training. These are the statistics I got last year. Mining sector 3.8%, Kumba 6%, Japan 10%. Then we wonder why countries like Japan are so far ahead of us. Because now we're only spending 1% and we're spending that on CETA accredited training. And now, having hammered the CETAs, I need to hammer the employers, because the employers are not doing enough to support the transfer of learning in the workplace. Because we assume in South Africa that if you send somebody on training, they're going to come back fully competent and be able to do the work. Now, there are two interesting publications. The one is the old Robinson that many of us know, who basically said that the performance results that you get from training is the training experience plus the work environment. So what they're actually saying is if the training experience has been excellent, like 80%, but there's 0% support in the workplace for assisting this person to actually translate the training into the workplace, your benefit is 0%. So the employers have an important responsibility. Broader Newsroom, also a very useful publication. What they did, they said there are certain things that the employer has to do, the line manager, before you send somebody on training, during the training and after the training, to make sure that what they've been trained on actually is translated into the business. Now, evaluating the impact on business results, we all know we have to do that. Most of us do level 1, level 2 training. They've got the smile sheets and we do the assessment and submit the portfolios and they go into this CETA maze. But few of us actually do level 3 or level 4, where we actually then say, are they applying it in the workplace? How are we monitoring that? And what is the company doing to assist them to apply the learning in the workplace? I mean, this is not rocket science. It's a very simple truth. And impact assessment, how are we measuring the impact? Can we show the link between the training and the business results? I think often we can't, because we didn't start with business results when we sent the guys on training, because we sent them a sheet and we said, what training do you want next year? Now, if you want to do performance-focused return on investment, I really don't believe you have to do this complex sum. I don't know how many of you have done the complex ROI sum. I've always tried. I haven't managed it, because I think those ROI systems where you have to do the calculation, they are actually designed for people who produce baked beans, and most of us don't produce baked beans. So it's not actually easy to say, this was the cost of the baked bean and this was the cost of the training, therefore I got ROI. That's not how it works. The model that I use when I work with companies is simply you have to look at the organization's business plan, what are the main performance requirements, analyze the performance gaps and the needs and the causes of those. Then you design training solutions or other solutions to address the specific performance gaps. You implement the solutions, you apply the learning, and you make sure that people are helping you apply the learning. Then you track the performance, and then you can measure ROI. Because then it's quite easy. You say, this was the performance gap, this was the cause of the performance gap, this was the specific training, maybe not a learnership, that they needed to do that, and maybe it wasn't necessarily NQF aligned, but this is the result because the problem has been solved and the performance has been improved. Now, I don't know whether we still know the road to workplace competence. I think sometimes we've sort of got lost. There's a lovely story that the evangelist Billy Graham told about himself. He said he arrived in a small little town in America and he wanted to post a letter. It was those days before the email. So he was driving through town looking for the post office. So he finds a little boy and he says to him, can you tell me where to get to the post office? He says, yes, sir. He says, you just go straight, turn left at the traffic light, turn right at the next street, and you'll see there's a red building, that's the post office. He says, thank you, my lad. He says, by the way, young man, did you see the tent outside town? He said, yeah, I saw it. The circus is, when is the circus coming? He says, no. It's not the circus. I'm an evangelist. I'm going to give a talk there. I'm going to show you how to get to heaven. And the little guy looks at him and he says, mister, you don't even know how to get to the post office. But in all seriousness, I came across this picture. And I think that's what we are. I think we've got ourselves so embroiled in this system where all these things and the portfolios and the unit standards and the qualifications are designed, and I don't know, the QOF and the quality assurance partners and the assessment design partners and the curriculum and all these things, that we've actually forgotten what it's supposed to be about. And I find that most organizations are just busy trying to make sure that they align whatever they do to the CETA so that they can get money back from CETA. But in the process, I think we're damaging organizations and we're not actually assisting people to become workplace competence. So I say thank you. And I've written a book in which most of these simple truths are: Staff Development Guide for Employers. The first 5 emails I get with a good motivation of why you should get them, I'll email you a book. Thank you very much and good luck.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Suzanne. And I think that for judging by your reaction, these are simple truths that you all knew and perhaps got caught up in the drama. You forget that sometimes effective is quite simple. And just asking the right questions, and instead of trying to fill forms, just do the things that we're supposed to be doing. So thank you so much for resonating with the audience and telling us about those simple truths and debunking some of those myths that have been leading us down the wrong path for some time. So, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand. You can start writing your emails now, I'm sure. Suzanne Hattingh.
Since 2009, the Moses Kotane Institute has been providing leadership programs to communities. In our drive for people-centered economic development, we focus on leadership development in the areas of government as well as the more traditional structures. This leadership and indigenous knowledge program is specifically designed to help further enhance efficiency and sustainable service delivery. Become our partner and let's invest in our tomorrow together.